Imagine the scene. It is the early morning of August 5th, 1962. The air in Brentwood, Los Angeles, is heavy and still. Inside a modest hacienda at 12305 5th Helena Drive, the most famous woman in the world lies face down on her bed, clutching a telephone receiver. The lights are on, but Marilyn Monroe is gone. Within hours, the world would be told a simple story. A lonely, depressed starlet had taken her own life with a handful of barbiturates. Case closed. But what if I told you that the scene the police found was an elaborate stage play? What if the most vital evidence was scrubbed clean before the first officer even walked through the door?
And what if the secret to her death was written in a small red diary that vanished into thin air that very night? Today, we are going beyond the Hollywood glamour and the tragic blonde trope. We are diving into the suppressed FBI files, the testimony of the wiretappers who heard her final screams, and the dark political web that made Marilyn Monroe the most dangerous woman in America. This is the dark secret behind Marilyn's final days.
To understand how Marilyn died, you first have to understand how she lived in those final months. She wasn't just a movie star anymore. She was a woman who knew too much. By 1962, Marilyn was entangled with the two most powerful men in the country, President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. It started as a thrill, a high-stakes game of proximity to power. But Marilyn was never just a casual fling. She was highly intelligent, deeply observant, and she kept a record. She called it her Red Diary.
In this book, she scribbled down more than just her feelings. She recorded political secrets, talk of the mafia, and discussions about national security that she overheard during her pillow talk with the Kennedys. She thought it was her insurance policy. In reality, it was her death warrant. Think about the pressure she was under. The studio, 20th Century Fox, was threatening to sue her. Her health was failing, and yet she was planning a massive comeback. She was happy, or at least she was fighting. Does that sound like a woman preparing to end it all?
Let's look at the night of August 4th. The timeline given by the witnesses is a mess of contradictions. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, initially said she found the body around midnight. Later, she changed it to 3 a.m. Why the 3-hour gap? Because that gap was used to sanitize the house. Throughout that night, neighbors saw a very specific car parked outside Marilyn's home. It belonged to Robert Kennedy. While the official record places him in Northern California, multiple witnesses, including LAPD officers, saw him in Los Angeles that day. Why would the Attorney General of the United States be at a movie star's house hours before she died? The answer lies in the ears of the men who were paid to listen. Marilyn's house wasn't a sanctuary, it was a birdcage. It was bugged by at least 3 different groups: the FBI, the CIA, and the Mafia. Private investigator Fred Otash later claimed he heard a recording of the final struggle. He described a violent argument between Marilyn and Bobby Kennedy. She was screaming, demanding to be treated with respect, threatening to hold a press conference the following Monday to tell the world everything. She was going to burn the house down. And then the recording went to a struggle, followed by a chilling silence.
Now, let's talk about the science, because this is where the suicide story completely falls apart.
The autopsy was performed by Dr. Thomas Noguchi. He found massive levels of Nembutal and chloral hydrate in her blood. So much, in fact, that she would have had to swallow nearly 50 to 60 pills. But here is the problem. Her stomach was empty. There was no yellow residue, which is typical of Nembutal capsules. There was no nausea, no vomiting, and most importantly, there was no water glass on her nightstand when the first people arrived. How do you swallow 60 pills without a drop of water? You don't. You receive them through an injection or a forced enema.
Dr. Noguchi himself noted that he found no needle marks, but he was also prevented from doing a full microscopic examination of certain areas of her body. Why was the medical examiner's work being throttled by higher-ups? It is almost as if the conclusion had been written before the autopsy even began. As we go deeper, the shadows only get longer. Have you ever wondered why Marilyn's phone records for that night were seized by the FBI and never seen again? Or why her housekeeper was seen washing the bedsheets at 4 a.m. while the police were still investigating the room? You don't wash the laundry when your employer has just died, unless you're washing away evidence. This brings us back to the Red Diary. After the body was discovered, a coroner's investigator named Lionel Grandison saw the diary. He described it clearly. He said it was filled with names of government officials and mentions of a plot to kill Fidel Castro. He was told to keep it safe. By the next morning, the diary was gone, and Grandison was told to sign a death certificate that he didn't believe in. He was threatened with his job and even his life if he spoke up. The silence was bought with fear. But why kill her? Why not just discredit her? Because by August 1962, Marilyn Monroe was no longer controllable. She was a woman who had been discarded by the Kennedys, and she felt the sting of betrayal. She wasn't just a threat to their reputations, she was a threat to the presidency itself. The Cold War was at its peak. The mob was breathing down the neck of the administration, and here was Marilyn, the ultimate wild card, holding a book full of secrets that could topple the entire structure. If she had held that press conference on Monday, history would have been rewritten. But she never got the chance. The narrative of the broken, suicidal blonde was too easy for the public to swallow. It fit the character she played on screen. The world mourned her, but they didn't question the story. They didn't ask why the chief of police was a close friend of the Kennedy family. They didn't ask why the FBI had a 1,000-page file on a woman who just sang songs and made movies. They just accepted that she was too fragile for this world. But let's look at the facts again. Marilyn had just bought a new home. She had just signed a new multi-million-dollar contract. She was in talks to star in a biopic of Jean Harlow. She had everything to live for. The dark secret isn't just that she was murdered, it's that her death was a coordinated effort by the very institutions meant to protect her. It was a cleanup operation. From the moment she stopped breathing, a machine turned on to ensure that the truth stayed buried in the dirt of 5th Helena Drive. They took her diary, they took her phone logs, and they took her dignity, turning her into a cautionary tale of Hollywood excess rather than a victim of political assassination. Even decades later, when the files were partially declassified, the most damning pages were blacked out. What are they still hiding? Who are they still protecting? The tragedy of Marilyn Monroe isn't just how she died, but how she has been remembered. We remember the white dress, the breathy voice, and the tragic end. But we should remember the woman who was brave enough to stand up to the most powerful men in the world and who paid the ultimate price for it. Her final days weren't a slow spiral into madness. They were a frantic race against a clock she didn't know was ticking. She was surrounded by sharks in a pool she thought was a sanctuary. As we look back at the evidence, the inconsistencies, and the missing pieces of the puzzle, it becomes clear that the official story is the biggest lie Hollywood ever told. Marilyn Monroe didn't die of a broken heart or a chemical imbalance. She died because she was a witness who refused to be silent. The Red Diary may be gone, but the echoes of her final night still haunt the halls of history. We owe it to her to look past the makeup and the movies to see the truth. If you found this deep dive into the real story of Marilyn Monroe fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're going to continue uncovering the hidden history and the dark secrets that the world tried to forget.
What do you think happened that night in August? Was it a tragic accident? Or was it the ultimate cover-up? Let me know your theories in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for watching, and stay curious, because the truth is always more complex than the legend.